So Britney Spears has been under a conservatorship for a very long time now, and basically what that means is that even though she's an adult, she can't legally make decisions for herself. That means she can't enter into a contract, she can't make decisions for her own kids, and she can't even hire an attorney to represent her. So what exactly is a conservatorship, and how did Britney Spears end up in one? And what does her situation look like, and what might it look like in the future? All of that coming up on Legal Bytes. Hey everyone, welcome to Legal Bytes. I'm Alyte, I'm a lawyer, and on this channel we explain the law one bite at a time. So you may be following the Free Britney movement, or maybe you heard about the documentary that just came out called Framing Britney Spears. However which way you arrived here, you might be wondering what a conservatorship is and what her whole situation is about. So in this video, first we'll talk about what a conservatorship is in the first place. Then we'll get into how Britney Spears ended up in one. And finally, we'll get into what her situation looks like now and what it might look like in the future. So what is a conservatorship? Well, basically a conservatorship is when a judge has, after a certain process, looked at a certain person and decided that they don't have enough capacity in order to make decisions for themselves. You may have heard of conservatorships or guardianships, and they might mean slightly different things depending on what state you're in. For example, in Washington, D.C., a conservatorship technically is only over someone's financial decisions, and a guardianship covers someone's care, for example, medical care. So you can have one person be a conservator and one person be a guardian, or you can have one person fulfill both roles. Now in California, it's a little bit different. You have a conservator that's for adults and a guardian that's for minors. And in California, you can have a conservatorship of the estate and a conservatorship of the person. Conservatorship of the estate is to manage someone's financial situation. Conservator of the person is to manage someone's care. Now conservatorships fall under the area of law called elder law, and that's because typically conservatorships are for people that are very elderly. Most commonly, you'll see people that have certain conditions like dementia that progressively get worse over time. The aim of a conservatorship is to set up someone who can be trusted to make those decisions for someone else, and to essentially get complete control over that person's finances and care. And that's really because even though this person can no longer make these decisions for themselves, they still obviously have certain decisions that need to be made. And that's a situation that can otherwise be ripe for something like elder abuse, which is unfortunately incredibly common. Now, even with a conservatorship, you can have situations that involve elder abuse. But the aim is always to make decisions in the conservatee's best interests. Now, there is a way to avoid conservatorships, and that's actually by executing a power of attorney or advanced medical directive. Powers of attorney are typically used for financial decisions, and advanced medical directives, as you can probably guess, are typically reserved for medical decisions. But when an individual executes one of those kinds of documents, obviously they have to have capacity in the first place, meaning they have to have the ability to understand what it is that they're drafting and what the consequences of that document are, etc. But the benefit of executing those kinds of documents is that you can set up whoever you want to be as your agent, or co-agents. Now, because conservatorships are typically reserved for the elderly, you'll hear a lot of people talking about Britney Spears' case and say that it's incredibly unusual. And that's not only because of her age, it's also because of her productivity. Even during the conservatorship, she's been able to go on tours, be on TV shows, and have, I think, advertisements, all kinds of things like that she's been able to actually go out and make money. But alternatively, most conservatorship cases involve someone who has long since been retired and hasn't worked for money for a very long time. And on top of that, they typically have some sort of a condition that is progressively getting worse over time. So how did Britney Spears end up in a conservatorship? Well, in order to explain that, you first have to understand that there are really two sets of information. There's what's publicly available and there's what's been kept private. If you saw the documentary Framing Britney Spears, you understand that around a decade or so ago, certain events took place that called into question her ability to take care of herself and her children. She had certain outbursts against the paparazzi.
Please, guys, don't do this.
She shaved her head one night. It really was a tumultuous time in her life. She even was hospitalized at one point, and the information that is available seems to suggest that it was for a mental health reason. Now, beyond that, what's not publicly available is the specifics about her medical condition. Medical documents about any diagnoses or treatments or current conditions are available to the court, but they're sealed off from the public. So because of that, there's certain information that the court has and that the different parties and their representatives have that isn't available to anyone else. But given all of the information that was presented to the court, what they did was they determined that she didn't have capacity in order to manage her own life. And so they appointed her father, Jamie Spears, to be her conservator. Now, the thing that seems to keep coming up is the fact that Jamie Spears wasn't really involved in Britney Spears' life before this point in time. And it was suggested in Framing Britney Spears that Britney's dad was not exactly great with money. So many people are suspicious about his motives and seem to suggest that he's kind of controlling Britney so that he can control her finances and finance his own life. So while it's not entirely clear, there seem to be suggestions that at some point in time, Britney may have consented to the conservatorship. So you may be wondering, how can she possibly consent to something that says that she doesn't have the ability to make decisions? Well, depending on the circumstances, different levels of capacity may be required for different things in the law. For example, getting married, getting divorced, executing a will, executing a contract, etc. And FYI, the analysis for what level actually is required for each of those things can change from state to state. But the other parties that are involved in this are obviously the judge and a court-appointed attorney for Britney. Now, at the time that the conservatorship was put into place, it looked like there were several different characters that kind of came into Britney's life and may have started to unduly influence her. So in any kind of conservatorship situation, a court is going to look at the full context of this person's life, and they'll use that to determine what truly is in this person's best interests. Now, obviously, judges can get things wrong, and sometimes they do. Now, in this case, the judge involved is Judge Brenda Penny, and funny enough, I've actually had cases in front of her before. I can't remember exactly which ones or what the outcome was because it's been a little bit of time, but there's nothing in my memory that stands out to say that she would be in any way unprofessional about any case, including this one. Now, the big question here is whether or not Britney Spears should be in a conservatorship, and there's really no way to know that without all of the information, including her medical information, but I don't expect that to become public anytime soon. Something that I do know, though, is that number one, courts take a very long time to move through a case. Number two, these kinds of cases take even longer. So if there is development out of the current status quo, I wouldn't expect it to happen very quickly. But nonetheless, many people are questioning whether Britney Spears should be in this conservatorship to begin with. She obviously is able to tour. She obviously is able to go on TV shows and be a personality on them.
I want to know who let you on stage. I feel uncomfortable with you even staring at me.
But those on their own are not necessarily enough to get Britney Spears out of conservatorship. So realistically, we can't really say whether she should or shouldn't be in one without the full picture of her whole medical record and all of that stuff. So what's Britney's status and what does her future look like? Well, the latest is the court just confirmed a decision to add a co-conservator to serve with her father. And that co-conservator is an investment firm, the Bessemer Trust Company. Now, they're an institutional co-conservator, which can have some costs and benefits. On the plus side, you have an institution that will act probably with more objectivity than her father will. But on the minus side, institutional agents like the Bessemer Trust Company could potentially have less passion for the work. And that can potentially translate to less care for what her situation is and what sort of changes might need to be made in her life. Then again, also on the plus side is that institutional agents typically have greater professional requirements, so they're under more scrutiny than a typical lay person acting in that role. But on the minus side, and kind of related to that, is that you can also have more red tape involved. And that's because you're typically dealing with a certain level of bureaucracy, and you have people that are maybe concerned a little bit about liability for their decisions. So they're going to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more slow, which means if you need decisions to be made a little bit faster, you can potentially run into problems. I actually have had some experience working with institutional agents in these kinds of roles, and some are good and some are not so good, and for the reasons that I've laid out just now. So the court's appointment of an institutional agent as a co-conservator could be a mixed bag. It could be great, it could be not so great. So in this case, where Britney Spears apparently doesn't want her dad to be serving as a conservator anymore, and where people are maybe questioning his motivations at this point, it could be a good thing. But keep in mind that it could also change nothing. Bessemer could get involved and work with Jamie and work with Britney and find that things are fine the way that they are as the status quo. They might find that Jamie is actually a pretty decent conservator, and they may find that Britney actually needs a conservatorship. On the other hand, it's also possible that Bessemer will come in and find that Jamie is totally unworkable and that he's just leeching off of Britney. Or they may come in and realize that Britney actually doesn't really need a conservatorship at all. All of those are possibilities, but really all we have is a pretty hefty dose of speculation. And realistically, we'll only find out with time. Lots of time. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting and informative, and if you did, we'd love it if you'd hit the like button. And if you're new to our channel and you haven't already, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you can find out when we upload more content like this. See you in the next video.